Welcome to Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I'm back to talk about Severance on Apple TV+. Each week, I am bringing a theory video based on the episode we just saw this week. That is Season 2, Episode 4, Woe's Hollow. And whoa. Not only did we get this strange out-of-office experience, we got confirmation that Helly is in fact Helena, the insane interaction between her and Irving at the end, some relations between Mark and Helly. And moving forward, I imagine this is not the last we will see of Irving. I guess we will probably see Audi Irving content, especially after that dream he had. And speaking of dreams, I mean, this might be the first time some of these innies have ever experienced sleeping. How wild is that to think about? But either way, I expect we are going to get more Irving. There's no way they're just going to let John Turturro ride off into that Severance sunset, and I can't wait to see what is next, how this impacts MDR on the inside, and then if it trickles into the outside world. Also, I really hope Irving and Bert get to see each other again. Let's start by mentioning exactly what this retreat is called. It's an outdoor retreat team building experience, which they call an ORTBO. And you probably noticed if you rearrange those letters, yes, it spells robot, which really formulated my theory for this video. Robots are not real, they're not human. I don't think that Dieter Eagan is real. And I also don't think that Woe's Hollow is real. To me, this feels like some sort of VR video game world, or perhaps they're experiencing this in some sort of unconscious state where their bodies are all laying there down in the Lumon offices and they're having a collective experience somehow mentally, which, I mean, I've got to guess Lumon has the capabilities to pull off. But overall, the Dieter Eagan National Forest, I don't think that's a real world whatsoever. And there are some clues that give that away, which I'll get into in a little bit. But first, let's go over a few of the key things that we do know about Dieter Eagan. He was born in 1841 and suffered immense sickness during his childhood because his parents had a close biological relationship. Incest, that is never a fun thing, and perhaps could explain if there were issues. Maybe this did lead to some sort of mental illness for Keir. Perhaps dissociative identity disorder, where he actually developed a whole other personality who he identified as his brother Dieter, and Dieter never existed ever. The name of Keir and his brother. Keir is a masculine name that comes from the Irish word Ciar, which means dark or swarthy. Now, if we're looking at Dieter's origin of name, it comes from a German name, and the Germanic words Diot and Harry, which mean people and army, respectively, literally translating into army of the people. So we've got our dark person on one side and then the army of the people person on the other side. The show leans heavily into duality, so whether or not Dieter is actually a real person, we're still getting this sort of split within the mind of Dieter Eagan that perhaps leads him to the severance procedure someday. We know Keir invented the 4 tempers, which are frolic, woe, malice, and dread. I'll get more into the woe part of it all in a little bit. But it also made me wonder, if we're getting the origin of woe here, are we going to see context for the other tempers? I doubt they're going to be giving these innies more ORTBOs moving forward, given how bad this one actually was. And yeah, okay, I'm here saying maybe it's VR, maybe it's some sort of video game. It feels like a quest, but I will also say that that waterboarding type of situation with Irving holding Helly underwater, that did feel very real. So whether or not it is a real world, it is VR, they're experiencing this in an unconscious way, there's still something very off about this world. And I'm also wondering, like, how did they get the Audis there? How did they sell them on, hey, we're just going to plop you out here in the middle of a sheet of ice in the middle of winter, and we're just going to have a little experience. I mean, do we think that all the Audis signed off on this? It seems to me like it would be much easier if this was some sort of mind-generated thing or virtual world. And it got me thinking about the video game virtualness of it all, because this feels like such a quest. Are you kidding me? You have to go to the Scissor Cave and retrieve the sacred text, this IV Appendix, which for some reason the severed employees were not allowed to read before. And it was written on Keir's deathbed. Can we trust him as a narrator to even be delivering a story that happened? It sounds more to me like a person who is at the end of their life, and not so much a deathbed confession, but just some wild, nonsensical stuff from a mind that has obviously been through quite a lot over the years, having been the founder of Lumon. Something else I was thinking, in the last episode, when we had Natalie there talking to Ricken, and we confirmed that he is doing some writing for Lumon, could Ricken have written this entire book in the first place? Some of the wording sounds very similar to the UUR. Is this all just some big made-up fairy tale game that they are playing with our innies? If in fact they did finish Cold Harbor, because I've got to assume they did, otherwise with them being on such a tight deadline, you think they're just going to let them out for a weekend trip? I don't think so. So while it is shrouded as this team building experience, unfortunately it doesn't end anything like that. But with the passage of time as well, I mean, could they have finished Cold Harbor and now this is a flash forward? It just doesn't sit right that they are gonna let them out of the office with this impending deadline. In this fourth appendix, we learn quite a bit about Keir and his alleged twin brother Dieter. Dieter wanted them to go live in the forest as paupers, and so they did. However, there was an incident that occurred. As they say, Dieter spilled his lineage, which we all read through the lines. We know what that means. Helly explained it for us. By spilling his lineage on the soil, that caused Dieter to become an instrument of nature. Keir said he turned into nature and described this very graphic, strange scene. I just don't think Dieter ever existed. I do think Keir either has some sort of dissociative identity disorder and has created a whole nother personality as a scapegoat or to compensate for some of the things in his life that he feels shame over, which clearly there's a lot of shame surrounding the actions that Dieter was conducting out there in the woods. Or there is the possibility he really did have a twin brother, he really killed him, and this was all just a coping mechanism for dealing with the fact that he did kill him. It's not my leading theory though. So did he just create this other personality to make himself feel better about doing things that he feels are shameful? Or is this an alter ego? Not necessarily a mental illness situation, but an alter ego, and him killing this alter ego is symbolic of him initially establishing this concept of severance. Again, the show leans heavily into duality, nothing more about duality than twins themselves or doubles, which we also saw here. We saw the doubles of our MDR innies. We know the show's not about cloning, they've said that, so they're not clones. We do get the context of robots here because obviously the acronym, but between seeing them and then the gaunt manifestation of woe, first of all, it feels very horror-esque to me, but also going back to the whole video game situation, those are the types of characters you would expect to see in a video game. I'm not a gamer, and I know there's a term for it, the non-playable characters or whatever they're called, but they do strike me as just kind of like generic people pointing the way. But the fact that they are pointing the way, guiding them, it feels like they have to complete this mission like an escape room, like a video game. And yeah, it is a team building experience, but I do think there's something more to it than simply getting them out of the office. And yes, it did end very wrong, and they will never have one of these ever again. But so many things just felt really out of place and disconnected in this episode, which, by the way, was amazing. I loved every second of it, and it far exceeded my expectations from some of the images that we've seen in teasers or trailers. I mean, just whoa. And back to that sacred text again, when Milchick's sitting around the fire reading it, and Helly just starts like busting out laughing. At first, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is Helena's way of trying to fit in, make light of it. She's acting like she thinks Helly would be acting. Or is she laughing because she knows this is completely made up and is so absurd, and the subject of this story that they're trying to pass off as Keir's dying narrative? I mean, it could go either way, because either way, it is ridiculous, whether it's made up or not. So I can't tell if this was for show or if it was actually an authentic Helena reaction being like, this is the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. Because, I mean, let's face it, I think we all kind of got that vibe, the absurdity of it all. Oh my goodness. So we talked about Dieter becoming this instrument of nature, and that leads to Keir mastering this temper of woe. And like I said, woe manifests itself into this really creepy looking woman who is described as a gaunt bride entity, half the height of a natural woman. She kind of reminded me a little bit of a character you'd see in a movie like The Ring or any horror movie with some super creepy ghoul girl. I mean, gosh, I watched From. I'm not saying she's like one of the Angui kids, but I just love the horror of it all. And it was really unexpected to see a ghostly type of apparition in a show that hasn't really given much supernatural content. So I kind of like it. And like I said, I'm curious to see, will we get other origin stories for the other Tempers? Probably not, because obviously this Ortbo was not successful, but maybe they'll find another way to infuse those in to see how, for instance, Frolic came to be and how Kier mastered Frolic. I love Frolic. I think it's a great word. Frolic, frolic, frolic. I would love to see what the Frolic manifestation looks like. One thing that really stood out to me in terms of the fact that this doesn't feel like a real world, they had that TV cart with the video playing on it. Where's the extension cord? Where's the power strip? How is this thing getting any power? Are we really suspending that much disbelief and they just expect us to kind of accept it? I don't accept that. There are some things I don't mind blindly following, but a TV on this Arctic cliff filled with snow that is playing content with no power to be found, no generator anywhere. Something about that is a little sus. Not to mention, we have Milchek and Miss Huang out there. Did we notice that only our any MDRs had tents and were staying overnight? So, were Milchek and Miss Huang staying in some cabin just a little ways away so they could keep an eye on things? Or do they exit out of their VR world and just go back into the office and kind of supervise things from there? And just again, how they got there in general. Are the Audis all just signing off on this? Of course, Milchek says they did, but I don't know if I believe that. Their outfits feel very Russia. By the way, I am sporting my black faux fur coat today in solidarity. I wish I had a hat. I would have worn that as well. But this episode felt so different from anything else, and maybe it is just because it is such a departure from what we're normally seeing, fluorescent lights in an office or the strange world of Kier PE. But either way, I do not believe that Dieter Eagan is real. I think he is either another personality or an alter ego, if you will, if it's not necessarily the dissociative identity disorder. Or again, he just completely made this story up, and it's essentially a big fairy tale to play into whatever the end game was initially going to be with this Ortbo. Did they commission Ricken to even write this alleged IV Appendix sacred text? And why is this not represented more in the Lumon lore? That might be one of the biggest questions of all, given all of the statues, all of the paintings. Okay, they named a national forest after Dieter, but is that true, or is this just a made-up world? And just the strangeness and the brutality surrounding Dieter's death, things do not add up here, and I would not be surprised if we learn that this was all just some sort of game, some sort of story, some sort of fairy tale. It does not feel real world at all. In fact, the entire Severance world is very strange, and we still haven't really figured out what's going on. I mean, we've got references to the Civil War with Cold Harbor. We've got visual cues to the fact that they're dressed in old Russian type of outdoor gear. We've got these strange apparitions or robots, wax figures. I don't know exactly what they are that are doing the pointing here in this strange place. I mean, does anybody feel as disoriented as I do? And what do you think is going on? Do you think this is a real world? Is Woes Hollow in Dieter National Forest with the tallest waterfall in the world real? Or is this all just another Lumon lie? And they're giving us some fake lore they had Ricken write, all for the sake of whatever this end game is. And again, is there a time jump? When is this even happening? I feel so out of place in the best possible way with Severance Season 2. They are knocking it out of the park. This cast, the visuals, the gorgeous scenes of the show. I mean, the cinematography is just out of this world. And so might be the Dieter Eagan National Forest, because I do not think it is a real place that exists. Please do share your thoughts down in the comments. Please subscribe if you enjoy videos like this, where I talk about dark TV shows, because I've got a lot of other fun content on my channel, and I hope you stick around for more TV talk. I'll be back again next week with another Severance theory. I hope you'll tune in for it. Thanks for watching. Media Melanie, clicking off.